Good evening. I'm Rachel Gilkey, and I'm Director of Programming and Education here at Irish Arts Centre, and I'm pleased to be sitting down with Paul Hughes, a Dublin-born painter whose work you'll find throughout the entire building. Welcome, Paul.
Hello.
Paul is represented by Stone Step Gallery in Ireland and the wonderful Maureen McDonald. He's also represented here in New York with the Nikolai Avery Gallery. His work is in private collections all over the world. I think we're welcoming a few collectors here tonight as well. And though you've been painting for 35 years, it's only relatively recently that Paul's been showing his work publicly, so I think that this exhibition is a bit of a treat from that perspective. The exhibition, I Am Here and I Am Unwaiting, is a retrospective solo show covering 4 different series Paul has been working on all within the last few years. You can see in the work how he loves to play with light and scale and really dive into color, using emotional lyrical patterns of brushstroke to create movement that is equal parts captivating and energizing. We're delighted to have all of you here, and we're delighted, Paul, that you're sharing your work with us. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure.
You didn't start out as a visual artist. You, or at least in the same sense as you currently are now. You started out in advertising, but that's its own kind of storytelling. How did you go from advertising to the painter that you are?
Well, we tend in the world to look at things as being one thing at a time. The way I look at the world is that I've always been doing them. As my wife would say, I started out as a footballer. I then happened to fall into advertising. I've been a footballer, I've been an advertising man, and I've been a painter all my life. And I suppose my approach has always been the same way to all 3 of them, which is to give it everything you can. What happens to do in the world is that the world tends to focus on certain parts that's important to them. I had been painting for a long time. I only really started showing publicly, as you said, it's about the last 20 years. But it didn't always fit perfectly with the commercial world. Not so much for me, but for the rest of the world. So particularly my business partners. I suppose I kept them separate in Ireland for a long time because it suited. But the way I approach them all has always been the same. It's very instinctive, it's all in, it's relentless. So I suppose when I'd reached as far as I could do in the advertising world, and we were very, very successful, it freed me up to be more public about my artistic life and allow people to focus on that, I suppose. But for me, the way I approach them, they're not different things, they're very, very similar. As I say with sport, it's the same thing. You're looking to create things out of nothing. Advertising, you're looking to create things out of nothing. And communications, but the art world, it's just another version of what I do, except it's sort of really selfish because it's just about me and me on my own, and I don't have to talk to people, except here. Our first board meeting, actually, about 30 years ago when the company was set up, in the minutes, the first partners was that Paul Hughes will never have to meet a client or do a presentation. That lasted about a week. So for me, they're one is commercial, one is about growing other people's business, etc., etc. Football was about creating magic on a football field until I had to stop because of injury. Art, which we're doing the same thing, it's about self-expression. It's about creating something out of nothing. And my approach, what connects them all, is that need to be as good as you can be and to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And I'll die before I ever get as good as I can be. And that's what will keep driving me on.
You've given us a lot with that last statement. And I would like to ask you to actually speak a little bit more about your philosophy and around painting and the work that you do. I'm not surprised to hear you say that you see everything you've done in your life, even if they're vastly different, connected as a through line, because I think you see the same thing in your work, even though each of them is vastly different itself. Can you talk a little bit about that? What particular philosophies are you bringing into your painting work?
Philosophies, it's you know, you can only paint what you've painted now because of the things you've been through in life and what you've learned. And as a person, you're constantly growing and constantly learning and constantly trying to improve yourself. That philosophy of I suppose what drives me is this: I hate hanging around, and I hate hanging around for answers to come. I need to go and find them. I need to discover them. Because it's actually not the answer that's the interesting thing. It's the journey of trying to get there and what you learn and what you discover on the way, what you uncover, what corners you allow yourself to go around. And in that process, you're learning about yourself. I always say my work while they're very visual and abstract, a lot of them are probably as close to portraits, self-portraits, as they ever will be. But I have a obsessive, relentless nature to keep pushing it and seeing where it can go. And as my life is finite, but what I want to achieve and where I think I can go and the possibilities that lay open are infinite, and I need to go and find them. And I suppose it's in that way it's selfish, but and within that is the need to I'm very physical with it and I'm very emotional with it. Painting for me doesn't work when it's logical. For me, and I'm talking about me now, I'm not talking about painting, this is personal. So I don't seek to work out things first and then paint a solution or paint what I've seen or try and, for me, it's intuitive, it's instinctive, it's emotional, it's visceral. And when I get through there, when I'm painting, I don't go in knowing where it's going to end up. And that's part of the fun. And I allow myself and I trust myself to go on that journey to see where it can take me. And that's why it keeps opening lots of different doors. I mean, the interesting thing, if you go back in my work 25 years, there is a common link. There's a common process, which is hugely physical, hugely expressive. I need to be. I was very physical in sport. Some say I was very physical in advertising, a bit too aggressive in some ways. But I think in the work, and how I paint, I still bring the same attitude and so that's, I suppose, the.
Yeah. Well, maybe then jumping off of that and to talk a little bit more about your actual physical approach. I love these two photos that you shared with me, the shoes and the hands, and I'm pretty sure that your cell phone case is also splattered with paint.
I get a new one every few months. I have to really, yeah.
How is your, and also you're talking about scale. I think you've probably seen, at least on the first floor, the large painting there. You're going from very large paintings to smaller paintings. What's your actual physical process when you're in the studio?
My physical process is extremely hands-on, I'm not dainty. I'm a part of the paint, I'm a part of the studio. I see myself as, I just happen to be the delivery mechanism. I need to feel the paint, I need to smell the paint, probably not the healthiest. I need to sense it, I need to play with it. When I first started working, when I was a teenager or in my early 20s in the 80s, I did a lot of work with my hand. If I got a bad injury or something, I was lying down hospital. I made clothes, I made all sorts. I did a lot of work with my hands, and I really enjoyed the act of painting with my hand. For me, it was probably an excuse because my technical ability wasn't great and it bored me. But my process has always been very hands-on. And when I apply the paint with brushes or my hands, I can work with my hands or I don't. And I go through various phases of how I work it and how I don't work it. But it is a very physical process. And a lot of my work over many, many years has started on the ground, finished on the ground, lived on the ground. I haven't a clue what it's going to look like until I put it up because it looks very different down there. I work around a canvas, I move around it, I don't have a top, middle, bottom side, I just keep working and see where it takes me. As I've got older, probably physically not as mobile in certain ways, I start to use wall, bring it up to the wall every now and again, I bring it back down and I apply the same process. But that process drives me through bringing colors and materials that probably don't naturally go together. I will make them go together. I will force them to go together. I'm obsessed by directions of brush strokes and how, or hand strokes, and how that affects light. And it is, as someone once described, it's probably as close to sculpture as you can get on a canvas, which is, so for me, there's a huge satisfaction in that. I don't walk into the studio and pussyfoot around. I go in and I work hard, and I need to feel leaving exhausted, emotionally and physically. A bit like football, a bit like advertising every day as well. So that's what I need to do. I need to feel like I've left nothing on the pitch, you know. So I've left everything on the pitch and nothing in the dressing room. So my approach is the same way. And whatever comes of that is whatever it's going to be.
Thank you. I want to actually take a minute now to talk about some of the materials that you sent when you're, talking with us about what the show was going to be or what it was inspired by. And one was the quote from Waiting for Godot, which is also a part of the text that you can read to kind of engage with the work when you first enter the building. Why this quote, and how does it tie to the title that you've chosen?
I suppose when we had discussions about doing a show and bringing the work here to this amazing space, and very interesting space, and not non-standard gallery sort of space, we talked about bringing elements of 3 or 4 bodies of work together as opposed to it just being one, which is a challenge in some ways. And I was a bit scared, even though the work and the process is all very, very similar. There's a distinction in colors between bodies of the work. So as I do when I'm cycling around, it needs to make sense for everybody. It needs to make sense. So the part that actually, when I examined it and I really thought about it, what is it that unites all the work that I'm doing? And I was obsessed by the idea of that, but well, actually, in nature, which I paint, and it's what influences me most, is that every moment it changes. It's ever changing. It's constantly changing. It doesn't wait for anybody. Tides don't wait. Weather doesn't wait. Rain doesn't wait. Seas don't. Nothing waits. It just gets on with it. And that's how I work. Because I paint nature and I paint light. Light constantly moves throughout the day, goes into night, and it moves again, and we can't. And that's what unites it. So it actually struck a chord with actually how I am and how I work. I cannot abide sitting around waiting for an idea to come along. Although, as I say, I don't really work from ideas. Ideas come out. I like to write faster than an idea. Hopefully, the idea comes afterwards. But I cannot abide that. And I don't like it in people who say, well, you need to take a break and get inspiration. If I need a break, I need to paint, because I need to paint my way out of the problem. Waiting for me is a delegation. It's and this is just me. I'm not trying to say anybody else. So I am an unwaiting. I have an impatience. I have a relentlessness. I have a lot to do, and I need to get on with it. I don't need to stop. I need to keep going, and I'm lucky to be able to keep doing it. So that's when I was, you read Godot and you read that bit's, people sitting around, they're waiting. They don't know what they're waiting for even. They're waiting for something. They're waiting for the answer to come out of somewhere. And so I'm the opposite. I'm unwaiting. Now, I don't know if that's a good thing or not. People say you need to be patient. You need to practice your art. You need to, or maybe you just need to play football and get on with it, so.
Well, I would say, actually, I want to share something from Colin McCann, who the reason we met Paul was because Colin is a big fan and introduced him to us a couple years ago. And I asked him, because he's in Dublin today, reading from his new book, Twist. I asked him if he'd have a few words that he might share. Colin's pondering in Ireland. I'm in Dublin, which is appropriate enough because I'm not sure there's anyone who can capture the transatlantic spirit and the transatlantic light quite like Paul. His paintings do what all great paintings should do. He makes me want to step into them and then become myself. And I see that experience that he is relating about your work being kind of a similar idea of pushing through until you get to who you are. I think it's wonderful that he kind of had a similar response, but through his own words to what you're saying your desire is.
He's quite a clever man, Colin. Quite a expressive man. We have many conversations about various things, and our timing was right, but we were maybe looking at one of the Bastard Blues going on, Twist, which is so relevant. But I think it's really about pushing through. I had a show back in 2008 in Dublin, a big solo show where I had big pieces of work from the Absorption series. They're like big henges, big stone henges nearly. And the show, because it's funny, everything comes back in your life as you grow up. Everything keeps coming back and you're around. And that show was called Do You Ever Get There? Because I was going through a phase in my life is, do you ever get there? And I actually thought that was, am I ever going to get there? Am I ever going to get there? And then as you mature, you realize you never want to get there. Because if you get there, you're fucked. It's over. It's like you might as well. It's like a ripe apple. It's dead. It goes nowhere to go. So do you ever get there? Because actually, life is about the journey, not about the end place. But when I paint, what I like what I'm trying to do is paint paintings that just keep going and just keep going and just keep going. I don't try and paint flat 2Dness. I want to, even through one color like blues, I want people to keep going into them and into them and into them and into them until we can't see anymore. The funny thing about horizons, we're all obsessed by horizons, particularly Irish people, because we have this relationship with them where if you went over them, you never came back. So, but horizons is where we tend to stare at them and we put our hopes and our dreams and our loves. We all stare wistfully at them and we go, ooh, and it doesn't even exist. It's just an illusion or something. But if you walk towards it, it moves away. And if you walk away from it, it follows you. But it'll always stay the same distance, so you'll never get there. And I think he sort of gets that in the work.
Mm-hmm. This exhibition, as I mentioned, includes work from 4 series that Paul has worked on. Bastard Blue, which I also borrowed from what Colin said. It's called Bastard Blue because they appear to have no mother and no father except themselves. Green is a Myriad. And this was actually I was lucky enough to visit Paul in his studio in Dublin while he was working on that series. And you can see how things definitely must start on the ground before they go up on the wall. And maybe just to pause with those two, because those are a particular color that you're focusing on. Why were you drawn to that? And how does that connect with the kind of pushing through that you're talking about doing?
Bastard Blue came out of, didn't start out as Bastard Blue. It didn't even start out as anything. As Teres Barcello always says, paint faster than the idea, or while you're painting, the painting creates the thought as opposed to the other way around. I had used blue in all my work. I wasn't annoyed with it or anything, but I didn't have a relationship with blue. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I'm a Man United fan. I hate Man City. Grew up with that. But blue.
Football's always there.
Yeah, everyone goes, and blue can be, people tend to be. I tend to be quite sort of shallow with blue. We had a shallow relationship. We were not in love, but I used it all the time. And I thought, well, as an artist, or what I'm trying to do, I rarely call myself an artist. What I try and do is that I need to understand things. So actually, as COVID hit and the pandemic hit, I'd moved studio. And I needed to thrash the place I'd moved to, because otherwise I don't feel at home. I needed to wreck it. So I was locked away, and I thought, okay, I now don't know if I can paint anymore because I'm not in the same studio, and maybe it was the studio that created the work, the previous one, and not me. So maybe I'm shite, and I need to get over this. So I thought, well, what's your biggest problem? What's your biggest barrier? What's the issue I had? I had an issue with blue. It was just it was a color of logic, a color of corporate, a color of just safeness, and then as I, spent a lot of time in Kerry as well, I thought what I need to do is I need to confront it, because why do I have this issue? So I just said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get canvases, and I'm just going to lock myself away for about 8 months a year, and I'm just going to paint in blue. Paint with the problem that you have to see where it goes and what could happen. So I did that, and I used all sorts of blue materials, oils, inks, acrylics, pigments, everything, glass paint. Pigments are great because when you break pigments down into, they go down to different component parts. So Bastard Blue became this, I just got obsessed by it. And I literally lifted my head after 6 months and saw what I'd done and went, Jesus, blue isn't the problem, I was the problem. I was the problem because I couldn't see past certain things, sky, water, blue actually was just everywhere. It was so much, it had so much depth, it had so much energy, it had so much movement, and it moved into other spectrums, and it went. So I loved that, and that was a huge learning for me. And it also a huge learning for me that I could create pieces of work that related to people and spoke about Ireland and the Irish light from just one colour. But within that colour was so much, and I found that fascinating. And the reason why it was called Bastard Blue was because I was wrong and blue was right, and that was annoying. But I'm usually wrong about things. It's just, but I think it's the way I approach stuff is that if you have a problem or you're not getting something, you have to go and confront it. You have to, not in an aggressive way, the opposite way. You have to go and find out. You have to go and understand it. And then only when you understand it and jump into it and let yourself go, do things actually reveal themselves. I think in life, we spend a lot of time keeping our distance instead of jumping in.
And you said you've had a frequent enough experience where somebody who's viewing the work similarly has maybe a hang up with a color, or that's the first thing that they're responding to, which is I think a natural first step. What can you talk about that a little bit more, because you've said to me just backstage kind of there's a frequency there of that happening and then a whole experience that comes out afterwards.
Well, there is, because every time you do a body of work and people fall in love with them, firstly they want to know why you don't keep doing it, why you move it on and you go somewhere else. So when I suppose I did the Bastard Blue and they launched and they really hit something. It was really interesting, the reaction and the conversations around it, and the story was fascinating. And there's so many people coming out going, blues this, blues that, it's amazing, 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 amazing. And then you get the odd person going, I hate blue, or why blue? I can't buy it because it's blue. And they come back to you half an hour later and they didn't see blue anymore. It was quite interesting. Then when I went and painted green, which we'll talk about in a minute, but I why aren't you doing blue anymore? Because but even when I painted my Giverny now, or the Infinite series from about 10 years ago, colours, people would look at a painting and they'd go, I really love that painting if it wasn't for that colour there. And they're going, well, and that's not the fault of the person, is it? But I just hope with my work, as I say to people, I want them to see past the colour. In a funny way, the colour is slightly irrelevant. It just happens to be what the colour is. It's about the move, it's about so much more. And I hope when people I know who live with the Bastard Blue for a number of years, or the greens, or they end up not seeing them as those. They just see them as something completely different, which is great, which is what I want to do. So colour is slightly irrelevant in some ways. You shouldn't say that when there's a lot of colourful work out there. But it is interesting how but people as human beings, we all react to colours differently. Some people find red very aggressive. Some people find it soothing. Some people find blue very, very warm. Some people hate green. It's really interesting. It scares people in some ways. In Ireland, green's an unlucky colour. It's hilarious. People don't buy green cars. they're convinced they're going to die. You know, it's funny, you know.
So why did you pick up green after blue?
Well, me being me, in some ways, you know, the world was screaming for more blues. And I go, well, great, I will do, and I do them privately, and I will come back again and explore it further. But where I would wanted to go, I'd taken it as far as I wanted to. And then I was, a couple of years ago, I was in, you know, in my studio in Kerry, and I was fascinated. It was very warm, and it was very wet, as it is in Ireland. Very warm, but it was a warm and wet summer. And everything had grown and grown and grown. Everything was growing and growing. It was well into October, and things were still growing and growing. And I was loving that. And the greens were all over the place. There was just so many of them, and it was changing. And I was just fascinated at the time with Ireland, where we were sort of, as a nation, sort of talking about, you know, we're 100 years old, we're mature, we've made it, we're here now, we're done, let's keep it. And I was sort of, I thought, well, actually, that's not what life's about. I don't think it's what Irish people are about. And what I mean to say is these aren't green because it's Ireland. It's more about what the story I wanted to tell, which was that all these greens are wonderful because they're growing and they keep growing. And as soon as green stops growing, it dies. It's got nowhere to go. So what makes green and lusciousness great, and the Irish nature is it just keeps growing and going and going. And that's the journey. Every day it grows, every day the shade turns. Depends how much rain comes down, depends. And so I went into this green world, and I discovered a myriad, a myriad of so much that was just fascinating, and I loved it, and it gave me completely different, as a painter, it gave me a whole new set of emotions to work on. I don't particularly like to lecture people about stuff in life or about my art, but for me, that was about trying to find, again, how I could express where I lived, what I saw in nature, what I felt in nature, what emotionally I was about, where I was at various stages, and I could express it through one color. It was fascinating. Again, they're blue, you know, people can see landscapes, people can see abstraction, people see where they want to go to, but it all can just come from one color, and I find that fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
So that's where Green as a Myriad came from. And then UNICEF, I wanted to show them all together, and UNICEF saw them and saw the story with what's going on in the world, and so we launched them last year in association with UNICEF, which was lovely, in the RHA in Ireland. It was great.
And then the two other series that are represented in the show, Screaming for Joy, and we'll talk about My Giverny last. Screaming for Joy, did that come before you started working in sort of the blue and green spaces? And are you working on multiple series at the same time, or you really just devote to one and then come back to come back to another later?
I don't start out wanting to create a series. I just paint, and then stuff happens, and something starts to go on. The Giverny, which we'll talk about in a minute, came out of something that I'd been dreaming about, or I'd been feeling about, a fascination I had with something which I wanted to go and explore. And after I had done and was the blues and the greens, I always need to break. I need to okay, let's go here. Let's see where I go here. Because people then presumed I didn't do colour anymore. I was colourless. I was like, why are you so depressing, Paul? I'm not. But I started to explore those places, and they start to develop out of it. And the Screaming for Joy, I thought, was really interesting in that it was all about, I'm fascinated by moments, because life is just this infinite number of moments strung together. And sometimes we don't get the moment or get what is incredible within the teeniest of moments. And down in I was fascinated by how the water hit the coast of Ireland down there, and it's mad and it's smashing, and people say it's very scary, it's very wild, it's beautiful, and it's actually you jump into the sea and you get this moment, you're scared as you jump in off the pier, and it's freezing, but you come up with a massive smile on your face going, ah! And I started to paint nearly as a break from just a hiatus for myself, just try and capture that sense of that, and how did I want to express that. So Screaming for Joy came out of that, and it's sort of grown a life of its own. It looks like they're painted very quickly, but they're not. But I go I go in short bursts at them over a longer period of times, but it's when I'm feeling the mood and I just want to go, yeah. It could be a brilliant song. Rarely these days, it could be Man United winning. Rarely. Or it could be anything. It's just a moment. It's just you kiss your wife, your daughter smiles at you, your dog wags its tail, you jump in the sea. It's just sometimes there's just moments of utter joy and all you want to do is scream. And these paintings I try to capture, just these ones were just, I want them to feel that. Slightly irrational, slightly just moments of drops of joy.
You started talking about My Giverny, and we left this one for last as well because the work in the atrium, the Hanging Gardens, quite a number of works within that series, that came about because we were having a conversation about how important it is for Irish Arts Centre to make sure that we are greeting people who are coming up the stairs into the theatre and also through the window out onto the street with work in our atrium as a kind of unique and special place to have work. And your response to that, you said, okay, let me have a couple weeks, let me think about this. And the response that you came up with was the Hanging Gardens.
It's interesting because we'd had the conversation, maybe a year earlier. I would have painted one massive piece, and I'm glad I didn't, because out of problems and out of issues and out of things, you got to try and make something. Giverny itself, or My Giverny, the reason why I call it My Giverny is Giverny is well, I'm sure is Monet's garden, and I've never been there, and I was enjoying his work in as everyone does, Monet, and I was fascinated about how he was in these massive water lily paintings, and they were actually, his massive paintings were nearly focused on something quite small, and he was jumping into a world of water and reflection, of this worlds within worlds within worlds, and I love that. And there are many artists that, and then I used to, you have a few Guinness and you're sitting there and you're thinking, well, what if I was sitting there with Turner and Pollock or Krasner or Schiele or Motherwell, or we were enjoying ourselves, and how would we see it all? Because we wouldn't see it like Monet, because Monet sees things in his own world, which is one thing I wouldn't never, but how do we all see it? And then how would Paul Hughes see it? What would we talk about? What would we see? As my wife says, I think too much about too many things. But I began to explore that world of the Giverny. So it was my Giverny as to what I was imagining and feeling, where they're looking through plants, looking at the top of the water and the reflections and the worlds that go in there, and lying on the ground and staring up through stuff, and just the colours and everything that happens there, and the constant movement of between the land, the water, the land and the air, and evaporation and precipitation, and that constant changing of movement. So I said, how would we all interpret it? So there's no point in thinking about it. You got to interpret my way. So I started to do that, and it was nearly like an exercise for myself to see what I could do and where I could go. And then a couple of people by accident saw a couple of them, because I thought they were shit. I wasn't going anywhere with it. It was nearly like just me, just nearly distracting, painting my way out of another problem. And they really responded to it in a way I'd never seen, and because I hadn't lifted my head and understood what I was doing or trying to do. So I kept going and I kept going, and I got caught in the trap of trying too hard for a bit and trying to make them work. And then I needed to go back and remember who I was, because it's my Giverny and what I'm about. And so out of that came all these works which try to reflect that. And I can hang them any direction I want. Well, I'm the artist, so I can do what I want. And they're meant to be like that. And they're I went a lot back to using my hands and this up and down nature. And everyone said, you got to go to Giverny to see how it worked. And I actually went, no, because if I go to Giverny, I'm going to see what it's like, and that's going to be embedded in me, where this is my imagination and my daydream. I'll go when I finish, and I'll see. But the paintings can reflect what's on top of the water, what's in the water, what dragonflies might see, what the sky might see, the different time, different seasons. So when we went to create the atrium, and we talked about, I came back to you with the idea, well, let's do that. I thought, well, if we can create a garden, well, what if actually an individual painting was just a building block of another bigger painting? What if it didn't have a life? What if we actually gave it a life amongst something else? And you were brave enough to go with it and to run with it and to let it happen. And we shifted paintings around. And I think it's been a fascinating process for me in terms of a learning, in terms of how you can actually, you know, you finish a painting, you frame it, and maybe it's not the end of the painting. Maybe it has another life to give to something else. And I've really enjoyed that. It's been a real learning for me. It's really interesting.
Well, I think in part of Maureen and Paul came with all of the paintings to be considered for it on these little magnetized pieces here, and then using the blackened steel down in the Dublin Cafe as kind of the first canvas for figuring out how they actually might all talk with each other too, even though, you know, they're very unique, you know, very different approaches, and like you said, going different directions, different brushstrokes, different color uses. That was a pretty fun process.
It was really, it was scary and interesting, but I think in the end, if we all admit it, we could do as much of that as we wanted. It was when we came in here and started messing with them physically ourselves and we really started to actually know what was on that wasn't work. You know, you need to smell it, touch it, feel it, and see how they work together in scale. And I was again letting go of logic and just letting ourselves build like Lego, you know, which was fun, and it was great.
Yeah, and
I hope it's worked. You know,
I think so. And you know, a member of our production team, Thomas Short, really led the process in here, which was also just about testing the theories of how they might hang together. And if you haven't already, what I would encourage you to do is that this photo is from this floor, but it changes, and again, because of the way you work with light, it changes depending on which floor you're on. You can go up to the mezzanine level, you can view it from there as well. You know, all the different angles, I think, is worth sort of sitting with, moving slowly through and sitting with. Questions? Yes, sir, right in the middle there.
Hello, I'm a soccer fan, and I'm certainly was interested in your soccer career and how much it maybe influence you in your painting, because the soccer in itself has its own palette, color palette, definitely.
I think the way I look at football, the way I always did it was, and the way I played it, I suppose, was I never saw it as being about 11 players playing 11 players. I think a pitch is massive. I don't know what the square meterage or square footage is. And then if you look at it up there as well, every time you have a football, you can put it in about 10 billion places if you play with your head up and if you play instinctively and if you believe. As I always say, great players actually knew what was going to happen in three moves. I'm not saying it was that, but it's the way I played was that. I played with absolute passion and would walk off the pitch wrecked, and it was really, I didn't actually, it's funny, I never minded losing if we'd given it everything. I hated losing if we hadn't gone far enough or played well enough. But for me, football is an all sport. I'm going back for the Ireland-France game. Is all about football. Sport is hugely creative, massively expressive, and that was really, really important to me. And I took that into my advertising world, and I took it into my art world. They're the similar process. I approach them the exact same way. I still kick people. I still was a rough player, but I was blessed with a lot of skill and vision. I always believe, I hate players when they dribble. They have to have their head down to look at the ball to make sure they still have it. They shouldn't have to look at the ball. As I got slower, I became a defender. I might have been slow, but nobody ever went by me.
Another question? Yes, up in the
I have two questions. One is you had mentioned that you were painting with your hands because of your skill. You didn't feel like you had the technical skill. So I was wondering what the spark was to make you move into visual art in the first place. Doing that, you kind of decided, willed yourself into it. What was the flint that sparked you to move into it?
It's not complex, and it wasn't a decision really. I just loved doing it. We all do it in school, and you just love doing it, and you love doing it. I'm probably being slightly facetious and self-deprecating to myself when I didn't say I had a lot of technical ability. I can and I do, and it just bores me. So I suppose I just got great joy from doing it and kept doing it, and the more you do it, the funny thing happens, the better you get, and the more you get out of it. As I moved from, I mean, you develop brushes as your confidence grows, and different types of brushes, and you know, it's the easiest thing in the world to say you're not good at something, so it makes excuses in advance, and I was doing a lot of that. But I just found then, I found brushes and types of brushes, industrial brushes, non-industrial, just anything that actually I could make marks with. Mark making was really, really important. And as I became a lot more skilled in that, a lot more confident that I could control it, as I could control my hands, you use your hands less. But then I've realized I got over it, my hands were a critical part of it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but the spark is just that I just love doing it. If I didn't enjoy doing it, I wouldn't do it.
And the other question I have, are there sketching, did you sketch out actual landscapes at times? It seems I was looking at the paintings and I saw suggestions of actual landscapes, and I was wondering if there was a preliminary sketching of idea of a place, specific place, and then a deviation from that.
No, I don't sketch. I don't have the patience. I don't have the. I break pencils if I sketched. I understand what you mean about the landscapes. I suppose what comes out of me is what goes into me. Hence that whole series of absorption 20, 25 years ago. It's what I absorb. I love to stare, and you need to suck it in. What comes out is then my absolute expressions of what I'm feeling, and they tend to come out through what I've absorbed, where indirectly they are light, the movement of light, the movement, how those landscapes make me feel. But I'm not trying to paint specifically the landscapes, but subconsciously they come out. As people say, like if I was to be cut open and turned inside out, I think the inside of me would look like the paintings. I think I just bleed them. They just come out. I actually sometimes don't have a control. I don't know why I paint like this. This is why I paint and what happens. So I didn't purposely not do certain things. It's just whatever I feel like doing, you know. And a lot of the brushes I use wouldn't be, how would I say, preferred by many professionals. It'd be, you know, I don't get hung up about it. I'd paint with anything, do anything, use anything.
Yes. Thanks, Kestrel.
After listening to your process and your philosophies and the visceral reaction you have, giving 100% in every painting, how do you know when you're done with a painting? When do you get that? Is it a exhaustion, or is it, yes, that's what I'm feeling? Or how do you, like, because all your work is so diverse, so how do you know that because you said that it's not the destination, it's the journey. Is it just physical exhaustion? You can't do it anymore, or?
No, because I always put it away and take it back out, which I do. I sort of know. I know myself when I'm happy, and I'm not happy very often. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean I can't settle, and I'm known to get up, you know, at 4 a.m. and cycle into my studio because there's a mark that's missing, and I've been dreaming about it, and I need to go make it, and then I go make that mark, and it's wrong. It doesn't work, and I don't know why. There's no logic to it, but what happens is I always say the painting tells me when we're done, And a great test is sometimes you put it away, or you think you're done, and paint settles after a while, and then you put it back out. And if you instinctively go, you remember the moment, you remember what you were feeling, remember you're going through, you get it, you're done.
So it's the emotion.
You're done. I mean, quite often I'm known to take work out from 6 months ago and start all over again, because it's just not right. And if I'm not happy with it, it's a terribly selfish thing, because it's not about, what I don't do is think of what viewers are going to like.
Right.
Because
it's not for them.
that'll make, I will fail miserably. I can only paint what is going to instinctively come out of it. If people like that, I'm very lucky. So it's a difficult one. There's one on my wall at the moment which is bigger than the one down the atrium at the moment, and I thought I was done about 4 weeks ago. It's still going. Still going. I hope when I go back it won't be.
Do you like to paint when you're angry?
I paint, that's a big question. I'm not a very angry person. I don't get angry. I'm very passionate. I'm very emotional. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I am not good at politics. I'm not good at this stuff normally. I'm actually, if anger is just an emotion, it's a feeling, like sadness, like happiness, like everything, and you got to paint through it and you got to ignore it. I don't trash places. I don't, but it's part of who I am, and yeah. Some of my paintings make people very angry, but no, I just got to paint with who you are at that moment, and I can't avoid it, can't bypass it.
Any other questions? We couldn't have sequenced this when Kestrel was already up there.
So you had said, Paul, that when you have a problem, you paint it out. Or something else that you said is the painting kind of becomes the thought. But I also got the impression at one point that perhaps maybe you think that action, when you have a problem, action is overrated. You said something about keeping your distance. So I just wanted you to expand on that.
Okay, I'm trying to remember the second part. Yeah, the thought part for me, again, I didn't think that and then started to do that. It became logical for me, is that if I think about something or think I'm going to try and do something, I will be limited by that thought, I believe. So that's all I will paint, is that thought. So it's never going to be better than that. So I've nearly got to paint faster than the idea. I've nearly got to paint, and the thought a thought develops. But I don't let thoughts have a huge part of, it's visceral, it's feeling, it's how how I'm feeling. And one of the problems I do have is if I've been painting and I'm 3 hours into a session and a painting is like, fuck, this is done, I'm done. I get really annoyed, because what am I going to do for the next 7 hours? So what I've got to do is hide it and find something else, or I get other canvas and I start it. But I'm not sure what I was meaning about standing off or...
Keeping your distance?
Well, I sort of keep my distance from the world in some places. I'm quite hidden away, but no, I'm not sure. Like it is, there's a... as I said, I like to work faster than an idea, nearly, and I because what I find is that the painting ends up a thought, or the painting ends up an idea. That's how all these series come out of. They just happen by osmosis, and then they suddenly become something, and then we put names on them and titles on them, and the titles can be misleading. Something they can be leading. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I'm not sure. I feel like I'm not answering your question here, and I don't want to not answer your question. Sorry.
I think it was about keeping your distance from a solution, from getting to a solution, right? Because everything you're talking about is about working through, as you recalled, the journey.
Yeah, well, sorry. Well, I don't think I'll never be solved. I don't have a solution for myself, but certainly when I paint, I find myself absolutely been able to work through things that are difficult for me. And there is no end solution, there is no solved, but certainly I'm much more capable of understanding and living with it and going with it and seeing where that goes. But no, I don't know if I'm answering that, but I'm not looking for a full stop. I'm not looking for the place. That's not what happens with me.
I found the theme of how to approach a problem very interesting, especially when you were talking about Bastard Blue. So I guess I'm looking for some magical wisdom on, how many parts taking action versus how many parts keeping your distance and kind of letting go.
Well, letting go is doing something. So I'm a big believer in doing. Just do. Shit happens when you do stuff. Guarantee you what'll never happen is if you don't do fucking anything, nothing will ever happen. So if you've got a problem or if you have anything, you've got to start doing things. I'm not a big believer in sitting there waiting that for someone on a white horse to come in and give me an answer. And no, I've got to do. Because actually what doing is, you suddenly realize that the problem or something you're worried about actually doesn't exist in reality. Actually, the problem's over here somewhere, or this is where you want to go and this is where you want to explore. That's what Bastard Blue taught me. My problem with blue wasn't a problem. The problem was I hadn't worked hard enough to understand all the possibilities that lived in there. So the great way to solve problems is just to start. Just start. Doesn't have to be anywhere specific. Just start and start doing. And you'd be amazed at the answers that turn up.
And last question, do your sneakers purposefully match your paintings?
Well, they're actually quite dirty, sorry. But no, not purposefully, no. So I'm famous for actually, I used to usually wear black everything, whatever, and then, so please just give me a pop of color or something. No, I don't. No. That'd be matchy and clever, really, wouldn't it, if I did that?
Okay, we'll maybe take last two questions here and then over there.
It is on. Okay. So as you're speaking, I'm just thinking, what's going on in your studio while you're painting? Is there distractions? Do you need distractions, or do you need complete silence? Or what is going on?
What's going on? What's going on is I don't need I play music very loudly. My door is open. The birds, I feed birds, and like robins particularly come into the studio, which is lovely. But I have a lot of music going on, quite loud, and I enjoy getting lost in music. And I often put albums or stuff on repeat, constant repeat. I could listen to an album 100 times over a week, just constantly, because you get lost in the music. You just get lost in it, and actually don't even know I'm listening to it anymore. I'm not a mad fan of just letting Spotify take you on trains, on journeys, because I don't, sometimes you get lost in there, whatever. But music is a huge part of it, and I don't surround myself with art books and stuff. I don't find myself, because I would be influenced by it or I'd be driven by it. But I talk to myself a lot. I drink a lot of coffee. I don't drink alcohol in my studio in a long time, actually, because actually that's a cop out as well. That's an excuse for not doing good stuff. But I don't know if I'm going to answer the question, but distraction music plays a huge part. And if I actually see my paintings up close, there's nearly like sheets of music within them that are just with the directions and stuff. And music plays a huge part in what I love full albums, because albums have stories, and you get lost in that and you go around. And I listen to everything from, heavy rock music, the Idols and people like that, to the Sprints, to classical music, to Philip, to anything. I'm not agnostic either way. I just love music that makes me feel something. And again, I don't even know I'm listening to it, but it's as simple as that. And then I just surround myself with, all my paints are over the floor. They're not organized. Because quite often I'm just grabbing colors and I'm not even like football, I don't even know the footballs there. I'm just grabbing them and working with them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was expecting it would be like that. I just wanted
Yes,
to
it's quite. The floor, that actually floor was a new floor laid down about 2 months ago, and now there's no white left. And I'll change the floor, the canvas on the floor every 6 months. Interesting. In my previous place, there was a big studio bar with a concrete, and somebody kept a massive piece of concrete, actually, because there was painting. And actually, if that painting was taken down, there's all sorts of remnants of paintings and words and language. Sometimes I write words on the wall just to keep me locked in and looped into something, to keep reminding me of something, of what I'm doing and what I'm not doing.
And I think we have our last question up here.
Paddy last.
Hi, Roisin.
Hi, Paul. I have one question, 2 parts to it. The Irish landscape, nature, sky, water, all of those elements have been such a rich inspiration for you. So part 1 of the question is, would you, and you have 2 studios, one in Dublin and then one in Kerry, and you've talked about the light. So first question is, do you bring pieces from the Dublin studio down to Kerry or vice versa? And then secondly, would you ever consider painting geographically outside of Ireland?
I do sometimes bring paintings. If I'm working on it and I'm enjoying it, I will do, but the scale of them is very difficult. And I tend to paint slightly differently, but I allow myself to do that because I'm having different feelings, different emotions. You're just in a different place. But I sometimes some of the smaller works I'll bring up from Kerry, or I'll bring smaller works, and I'll bring them down and Finish them. Sometimes I just got to bring them up from Kerry because I got to send them to my framers, or I got to get them finished. But I don't. It rarely it happens because it doesn't work. It doesn't really work for me that way. But I mean, Dublin's beautiful because it's a horseshoe shaped, and I look out in the bay and it's incredible light, different type of light, because the landscape's slightly different, but it's light. Painting geographically, it's right. I don't know. I'm sure I could do. It doesn't interest me at the moment. I've got a lot to do in Ireland. I've a lot to do. I mean, physically, if I was suddenly had to go somewhere, or I had to go and live here or something, of course I'd work here, whatever. But I don't need to be in the place or staring at the place. I do all my work in my studios. I have painted outside in fields and stuff paintings and hedges, and come back to it 6 months later, but I'm not painting. It's just a place to paint. So I've never thought about it. I'm sure I could do, but...
Thank you. Can you applause?
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. Oh, yes.
Can I just say something? I just want to thank Rachel and Aidan here and the team, Mac and Thomas and everyone at Kessel. Everyone, they were so amazing over 10 days, helping us hang this, helping us arrange this. And for someone like me in Ireland, we have spaces. We don't have spaces like this in some places, but it's an absolute privilege and an honour to be invited and to be connected to a place like this. I did an afternoon at 2 hours with what were they called? They were Encore, or they were...
Oh, yeah, the Encore Senior Centre brought a group today, and Paul took them through the building.
They came around, and they were the toughest audience, but they were amazing. They were shouting at me and giving out to me my walls, but they were absolutely great. And I actually just thought it's amazing that this centre opens up to groups like that, just voluntarily. I thought it was amazing. So I think you guys are great, and thank you.
Well, the feeling is mutual. Paul is definitely a favorite here at Irish Arts Centre. Well, thank you so much, and we will see you downstairs.
Thank you guys for coming out. Thank you.